I think it was talked about in one of these sessions earlier. I think it's called value proposition. And lower cost is no longer a differentiator. So how do you differentiate yourself? And what value do you bring? And that's, I mean, all of us struggle. That's nothing that is unique to people here. Or we all struggle in the semiconductor industry. Give you an example, it's getting so commoditized. We have to provide a value proposition. And then so it's not an easy task. You have to be very introspect in terms of what are your core competencies. You got to be extrospect in terms of understanding the market and the customer's requirements. What is the pain he's having? How do you help him, solve a problem? And I think that is a universal theme that it's no different from services to selling you gadgets to selling you, products.
Okay. Well, you've had a chance so far to get a couple of different perspectives on what the market looks like. Now what we'd like to do is to take your questions. So if you could raise your hand, we'll hand out a microphone, and we just ask you to say where you're from. We have one hand. Oh, I think they're going to get the microphone. We have another one up front. Steve, if you could raise your hand again.
Thank you, Bruce. I found this to be a very interesting panel, and one of the interesting things is when some of the firms that do deliver services in the global delivery model come and they brief analyst companies in the United States, their perspective is very much, we've moved up the value chain, we're doing higher value-added engineering as an example. And yet on this panel, I think there's been more forthrightness about the fact that, very often it's more a support role. I'm just curious, what's your impression of that? Why aren't Indian firms more willing to say, initially our value proposition is more in a support role, but we could grow over time?
The end result to the OEM, which is what? Time to market, better capable products, and at a lower cost. So you can say that the innovation can come from impacting that end result. So in essence, that if we work in two shifts, that is still a contribution towards the end game of the customer. So I believe that when Indian companies present themselves, they talk about innovative way of solving customers' problems, not necessarily related to can they develop an intellectual property. So that's not how they position. They say that, hey, we know how to manage our talent, we know how to use the processes to reduce the time to market and impact your overall outcome. So I think that's how they position.
Okay. We have a question in the front.
Yeah, my name is Prakash Abawkar. My question actually is for Umesh Rajani, and that is, France is very much a votary of the European partnership. So how much of a role does that European thinking play in deciding whether to deal with a firm in Hungary or Czechoslovakia rather than India? Is it the time zone? Is it the fact that they're now Europe, whether or not they speak the same language? Why is it there's so much of an affinity for Eastern Europe relative to India when travel times are not all that different, capabilities perhaps? I don't know. I want your view of your clients in terms of those who have selected Eastern Europe and those who have selected India. And before I part, I had to counter Ajit Prabhu. The semiconductor industry in the US has had very high attrition and yet very high creativity. I think it has more to do with the mindset of the engineers and the mindset of the firms and their business model than the attrition per se.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to take up both the questions actually. I have some interesting viewpoints for the gentleman who asked the first question also. And both are related, because one is why Indian companies are not getting in, and the second question, relating the first question, is why they are not moving up after getting in. So First question is why affinity to Eastern Europe? Definitely, political factors do play a role because they are part of they are part of Europe. So now they are part of Europe. If you look at countries, but having said that, the real impact at the ground level are not being seen yet. So companies do have their approaches in Eastern Europe. Some of the companies do outsource. Most of the multinational service providers, large service providers like IBM, Accenture, HP, have their centers in Eastern Europe. Quite a few Indian companies have also shown their interest in Eastern Europe. But all these things are related to IT services area. Let's look at it from engineering services perspective. First of all, if you look at traditional French organizations, French by culture are engineers. Okay, so engineering has been the soul of the organization, has been at the very core of the organization. So first of all, to make them part with that core is very difficult. So that's the first biggest question that you have to face. Then if you move up, if you convince them to part and send it outside the boundaries, the physical boundaries of the organization, is to convince them to send it a place where the culture is completely alien, the language is not spoken, and trust me, this has a huge impact. I mean, we do see that, okay, you know, with English, India has large English capabilities and they can get into market, but when it comes down to getting the work done, definitely client would like to speak his own language. Okay, and looking at the Eastern Europe, the interesting perspective is that in terms of language capabilities and variety of languages spoken in Eastern Europe, it's more closer to Europe than India by all means. And for that perspective, even China, or if we are looking at any other countries like Taiwan or Vietnam or Philippines, which are coming up in the value chain. But the thing is that ultimately is the physical proximity number one, cultural proximity number two. These two main factors which will drive in future any kind of work that will go to Eastern Europe at the cost of India. How it can be taken up from the other point of view, how do you address this problem and turn it into an opportunity, is to have a local presence. And I'll give you my own experience. I've been talking to almost all the large enterprises of India over the last 2 years, and none of them had significant presence in terms of saying that, okay, we have a front end besides the marketing front end which would deal with the clients. And we are seeing ground level changes happening. Companies are investing in local resources, in putting people in place who are not marketing people, who are engineers, who can speak about the project management, who can handle delivery management. These things are vital issues because no matter what you do, the front end has to be localized. Otherwise, it will be difficult. It will always remain the same. It is like you are having the best value proposition in the world in terms of costing, in terms of efficiency, in terms of resources. Fine. Do you speak the language? Are you close to my culture? Is where it all comes down. And this is what I'm saying. This is where the real difference is in terms of US, UK companies or Anglo-Saxon companies and non-Anglo-Saxon companies. The considerations are different. The driving factors are different. Unless the company is forced in a big way, in a major way, on the verge of breaking down probably, that they will look at costing and probably move the work. But they will try to resist this change to the best possible extent. So this is the first thing as far as the entry is concerned. Once you enter into the organization, moving up the value chain is equally difficult because of the very same reasons. A lot of companies, a lot of Indian companies have made inroads into European organizations. They have got the work. Some of them are doing work. When it comes to scaling up the work in terms of skills or getting value-added work or increasing the volumes, is where the challenge is faced, because the thing is, again, the same thing. You need to have local capabilities in place, local interface in place, and it's a chicken or egg situation. Obviously, as a businessman, I would think that, okay, I would invest if I see the opportunity, but unfortunately, you are in a market where you will not see the opportunity unless you invest.